Hello, thanks for joining me. Okay, so I'm back, and we are going to continue the essential wisdom of the founding fathers because the election is just a couple of short weeks away, and I feel it's a time to be inspired, a time to remember things that we could consider when we're making this decision because this is it. This is a culmination of all things. God is testing us. What do you want? You know, the children of Israel back then, they wanted a king to rule over them when God was their king. And he brought them out. They were enjoying the freedoms and the liberties. They were sojourning in that wilderness, but he supplied for them, you know. He gave them happiness and joy. They had peace with their families. They were not in hard slavery and bondage. They did not have to make bricks without straw any longer. They were free. And freedom is worth everything. You know, if you have to camp out in the wilderness, but you're free, it means something, you know? And freedom is never free. There were sacrifices that these founding fathers made on our behalf. And so I think it's only good that we remember and remember their frame of mind, the things that they spoke and said, their convictions, their visions, and what they were willing to go through in order to realize their dreams. One thing is for sure, they had a tremendous vision of freedom, of a land where they could be free, free from tyranny, free from oppression, free from people usurping authority over them, over their God given unalienable rights to live as free men. And they had this vision, and this vision remained at the forefront of all of their thoughts and all of their actions, their ambitions, and everything that they would sacrifice. It was all worth it to them for future generations, you know. So anyway, so I want to read from the Essential Wisdom of the Founding Fathers, and we're on page 15. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And this is John Adams. To the officers of the 1st Brigade of the 3rd Division of the Massachusetts Militia, October 11, 1798. You know, and that is so true. You got to have a moral compass, a moral fiber, moral absolutes. There has to, which are given from Almighty God, because these are universal laws. These are spiritual laws, and they do not change. They transcend all religions. Loving your neighbor as yourself transcends all religions. Reaping what you sow transcends all religions. Um, and the results of keeping the commandments are that we live in peace and liberty. You don't have to worry about your kids playing out in the front of your yard and somebody pulling over to throw them in the car and take off. You don't have to worry about that. When we have God's laws, when we respect ourselves once again and respect and value our lives and our neighbors, we're careful to look and take care of one another. Okay. Um, and so the Constitution is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape into any form they please. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to Judge Roane, September 6th, 1819. But these men understood that, you know, unless people continued to honor the Word of God and God's laws, that, yeah, there was an area there where malicious people, wolves in sheep's clothing, could sneak their way in and could change things around and chip away and incrementally the Constitution that provided our freedoms. You know, they saw that. They saw that and they knew, okay. I wish the bald eagle had not been chosen as the representative of our country. He is a bird of bad moral character, like those among men who live by sharping and robbing. He is generally poor and often very lousy. The turkey is a much more respectable bird, and withal a true original native of America. Benjamin Franklin, letter to Sarah Beck, January 26, 1784. It is a part of the American character to consider nothing as desperate, to surmount every difficulty by resolution and contrivance. Thomas Jefferson, letter to Martha Jefferson Randolph, March 28, 1787. If there be one principle more deeply rooted than any other in the mind of every American, it is that we should have nothing to do with conquest. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to William Short, July 28th, 1791. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. George Washington, Farewell Address, September 17th, 1796. America, an immense territory favored by nature with all advantages of climate, soil, great navigable rivers and lakes, was destined to become a great country, populous and mighty, and would in a less time than was generally conceived be able to shake off any shackles that might be imposed on her, and perhaps place them on the impostors. Benjamin Franklin, from his autobiography. Well, there you go. All right, the wolves in sheep's clothing. I've been talking about the imposters, okay? This country and this people seem to have been made for each other. John Jay, The Federalist Papers, number 2, October 31st, 1787. I always consider the settlement of America with reverence and wonder as the opening of a grand scene and design in Providence for the illumination of the ignorant and the emancipation of the slavish part of mankind all over the earth. John Adams, in his notes for a dissertation on the canon and feudal law, February 1765. It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and at no distant period, a great nation, to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by an exalted justice and benevolence. George Washington, Farewell Address, September 17th, 1796. I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to John Adams, August 1st, 1816. Government and democracy. And we're really a republic. Okay. Why has government been instituted at all? Because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. Alexander Hamilton, The Federalist Papers, number 15, December 1st, 1787. What is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. I'm just going to say that right there. And I want to say that that's a true statement. Okay. Let me read that again. What is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. There you go. James Madison, The Federalist Papers, number 51, February 6, 1788. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. In its worst state, an intolerable one. Thomas Paine, Common Sense, 1776. Because government, as we have learned firsthand, becomes so inflated and so infiltrated by career politicians who never seem to go away and who subvert all the common decency and implement laws and just start chipping away and tearing up our Constitution, little by little, by all their actions, which are nefarious, which are insidious, which are not so easily seen, because they're wolves in sheep's clothing, as I said. If the government is in the hands of a few, they will tyrannize the many. If in the hands of the many, they will tyrannize over the few. Alexander Hamilton, Letter to Robert Morris, April 30, 1781. And if you think the people, on one side, anyway, that they're the ones who are actually controlling things, making the decisions. No, they're just puppets. They've got to have a face up there that they can manipulate behind the scenes, that can be manipulated, and do everything that they're being told to do by the people that are really running the things behind the scene that we never even see. The secret government that's behind the scenes. Okay, the whole art of government consists in being honest. Thomas Jefferson, from Works, the 6th, 1786. As the happiness of the people is the sole end of government, so the consent of the people is the only foundation of it, in reason, morality, and the natural fitness of things. John Adam. Proclamation adopted by the Council of Massachusetts Bay, 1774. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Thomas Jefferson. And that needs to be something that we all need to remember. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We have to be careful about the things that we consent. Okay, Thomas Jefferson, Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. The sneaky thing about these wolves in sheep's clothing is oftentimes when they're putting bills through, they'll tack on all kinds of hidden bills that nobody ever even knows about or sees until the damn thing's been signed, and then later they go back. And I remember how sneaky it was a few years back. I remember Nancy Pelosi being up there, and it was so adamant about getting a certain bill crossed and passed, and yet they were struggling with it, and it kept losing. I forgot what the bill was, but she was up there saying that we'll get it through. We'll go under and over and above and beyond, and if that doesn't work, we'll go around. And it was just this narcissistic, never, must win at all cost type of attitude. To ram this thing through, their personal Agenda 21 thing that was attached to this bill. And they were trying to get it through any which way they could. And I remember that they had wound up attaching things to some other bill that was getting passed. And nobody knew about it until the day of, after everyone signed it. Then they found that there were all these hidden bills that were tagged, attached. This is how sneaky and dishonest and disingenuous, You got to watch it for stuff like that. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is a necessary evil. In its worst state, an intolerable one. Oh, I read that already. Let's see. Where was I? As the happiness of the people is the sole end of government, so the consent of the people is the only foundation of it. Oh, I think I read that too. Oh, there we are. Okay. Metaphysicians and politicians may dispute forever, but they will never find any other moral principle or foundation of rule or obedience than the consent of governors and governed. Let me read it again because I chopped it up. Sorry. Metaphysicians and politicians may dispute forever, but they will never find any other moral principle or foundation of rule or obedience than the consent of governors and governed. John Adams, Novangelis Papers, 1774. The government is the strongest of which every man feels himself a part. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to H.D. Tiffin, February 2nd, 1807. The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. George Washington, Farewell Address, September 17, 1796. There is no kind of dishonesty into which otherwise good people more easily and frequently fall than that of defrauding the government. Benjamin Franklin, from his autobiography. I think it's the other way around in our day. Okay. The spirit of resistance to government is so valuable on certain occasions that I wish it to be always kept alive. It will often be exercised when wrong, but better so than not to be exercised at all. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to Abigail Adams, February 2nd, 1787. There is danger from all men. The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty. John Adams, Notes for an Oration at Braintree, Massachusetts, 1772. I am not among those who fear the people. They, and not the rich, are our dependents for continued freedom. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to Samuel Kervishaw, July 12, 1816. Among European governments, under pretense of governing, they have divided their nations into two classes, wolves and sheep. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to Edward Carrington, January 16, 1787. I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society but the people themselves. I agree with that. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. Hear, hear, okay? Thomas Jefferson, Letter to W.C. Jarvis, September 28th, 1820. I really do strongly believe that there should be more classical education charter schools about, and they should teach civics in every school, and they should teach the free enterprise, and they should teach the Bible as a foundational, building your rock upon the house kind of thing, because those commandments transcend, they're universal laws about respecting other people. Where did I hear in Japan? They didn't even begin teaching the children there in their schooling. The first thing they begin to teach the children there is how to respect others, respect people, respect themselves. And this is like for the first 6-7 years, I guess, of their education before they begin teaching them other, math and English and science or whatever it is they learn. But I'm just saying the first foundational thing is respect. That's amazing. Yeah. A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Hear, hear. James Madison, Letter to W.T. Barry, August 4th, 1822. Because when the people forget God and they forget the precepts on which our country was based on, the principles, and also just on decency and having a code of ethics, moral absolutes, when we don't have that, when there's ignorance and there's video games and there's endless pursuits of entertainment and no learning what really matters in life, we're in trouble. And that's why we're at where we are at today. All right. Our people here, many are sick, bloated, obese, with diseases, on medications, and they can't even, they're not in any condition or shape to fight back or stand for what's right. And they're partying and drinking, and that beer, is like they're just forgetting about what really matters in life. Seek first the kingdom. Everything else will be given, but seek first the kingdom, and hold that. Don't compromise your values, because once you sell out, you're gone. For what? For everything is fleeting upon this earth. This earth is all we have, and it's over before you know it. This body that we have, that we embody to live here, to live and breathe, we only have this opportunity to be reconciled with what really counts, with Almighty God, doing His will on the earth, because we're all going to be tested and tried, and that's all that matters. Everything else, you can enjoy your life more abundantly if you put God first in your life. Then everything else is a pleasure and a joy. You really do genuinely love and wish and support and encourage others, and you can have that. You can always have something, a spark of your light to give back. But that's where it comes from. When there are when the light goes out, all you have is darkness, and you can't see where you're going, and you stumble and fall, and there's no one to help you get up. When you don't have faith, when the nation that had been given everything loses their faith in Almighty God, we're in trouble, all right? I'm just saying. Okay, it always has been and will continue to be my earnest desire to learn and to comply as far as is consistent with the public sentiment, but it is on great occasions only, and after time has been given for cool and deliberate reflection, that the real voice of the people can be known. George Washington, letter to Edward Carrington, May 1st, 1796. A government of laws and not of men. John Adams, Novanglus Papers, 1774. The execution of the laws is more important than the making of them. Thomas Jefferson, letter to the Abbé Arnaud, July 19, 1789. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right. It's a French name. Happy is when the interest which the government has in the preservation of its own power coincides with the proper distribution of the public burdens and tends to guard the least wealthy part of the community from oppression. Alexander Hamilton, The Federalist Papers, number 36, January 8, 1788. A wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government. Thomas Jefferson, First Inaugural Address, March 4th, 1801. Agriculture, manufacture, commerce, and navigation, the four pillars of our posterity, are the most thriving when left to individual enterprise. Thomas Jefferson, First Annual Message to Congress, December 8th, 1801. That's right, and I concur. Keep the government out of our ability to make livelihood for ourselves and to improve our environment and things like that. I mean, there needs to be controls for safety, but other than that, no. It should be left to individual enterprise. Great confusion about the words democracy, aristocracy, monarchy. Democracy in my sense, where the whole power of the government and the people, whether exercised by themselves or by representatives chosen by them either mediately or immediately, and legally accountable to them. Consequence, the proposed government, a representative democracy. Constitution revocable and alterable by the people. This representative democracy, as far as is consistent with its genius, has all the features of good government. And that is Alexander Hamilton on the Constitution, 1788. Well, if he could see what we see now, when a few who've amassed so much wealth sit behind and have other ulterior motives, you'd have to wonder about that. Democratical states must always fail before they can see. It is this that makes their governments slow, but the people will be right at last. George Washington, letter to Marquis de Lafayette, July 25th, 1785. Where annual elections end, there slavery begins. John Adams, Thoughts on Government, 1776. It has been observed that a pure democracy, if it were practical, would be the most perfect government. Experience has proved that no position is more false than this. Pure democracy. The ancient democracies in which the people themselves deliberated never possessed one feature of good government. There you go. Their very character was tyranny. There you are. I rest my case. Their figure, deformity. And this is exactly right. I mean, it is. Because, look at it in our democracy today. They have been able to alter and chip away so much of our Constitution. But yeah, Alexander Hamilton, speech to Congress, June 21st, 1788. The Republican is the only form of government which is not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. You see, because they go hand in hand. The Republic, which this country was based on, believes in the unalienable rights of mankind to pursue, their liberties. Um, and so that's totally in check with what God would have for mankind, to live free, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, without government barging in and telling us we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't have a small business, and if you do, we're going to tax you all this. You're going to pay double taxes if you want to have a small business. We're going to make it impossible for you, to pay your tax. You're going to get charged fees, and I mean, all this oppression. Really, it's ridiculous. The Republican is the only form of government which is not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. Thomas Jefferson. Okay. The preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the Republican model of government are justly considered, perhaps as deeply as finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. George Washington, first inaugural address, April 30th, 1789. Some men look at constitutions with sanctimonious reverence and deem them like the Ark of the Covenant, too sacred to be touched. Thomas Jefferson, letter to Samuel Curvishall, July 12, 1816. I will now tell you what I do not like. First, the omission of a Bill of Rights, providing clearly and without the aid of sophism for freedom and liberty, freedom of the press, protection against standing armies, restriction of monopolies, the eternal and unremitting force of the habeas corpus laws, and trials by jury in all matters of fact triable by the law of the land and not by the law of nations. Thomas Jefferson, letter to James Madison, 1787. I have a right to nothing which another has a right to take away. Let me read that again. I have a right to nothing which another has a right to take away. And Congress will have a right to take away trial by jury in all civil cases. Let me add that a Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse or rest on inference. Thomas Jefferson, letter to James Madison, 1787. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay, Congress should make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So it's not established, but people have the right to worship, whichever way they like, but to prohibit the free exercise thereof, where in our day people are vilified and they're targeted and they're called. There's a lot of religious persecution going on. They call us what do they call it? Domestic terrorists. That's what they call people that exercise their Christianity. The First Amendment, ratified as part of the Bill of Rights in 1791. To the press alone, checkered as it is with abuses, the world is indebted for all the triumphs which have been gained by reason and humanity over error and oppression. Thomas Jefferson, Virginia and Kentucky Resolutions, 1799. So even back then, the press was checkered with abuses. Okay. Be not intimidated, therefore, by any terrors from publishing with the utmost freedom whatever can be warranted by the laws of our country, nor suffer yourselves to be wielded out of your liberty by any pretenses of politeness, delicacy, or decency. These, as they are often used, are but three different names for hypocrisy, chicanery, and cowardice. John Adams, A Dissertation on the Canon and the Feudal Law, 1765. The liberty of the press consists in the right to publish with impunity truth with good motives for justifiable ends. To disallow it is fatal. Alexander Hamilton, Propositions on the Law of Libel, 1804. I am for freedom of the press and against all violations of the Constitution, to silence by force and not by reason the complaints or criticism, just or unjust, of our citizens against the conduct of their agents. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to Elbridge Gerry, January 26, 1799. Subject, opinion to coercion. Whom will you make your inquisitors? Fallible men, men governed by bad passions, by private as well as public reasons? And why subject it to coercion? To produce uniformity? But is uniformity of opinion desirable? No more than of face and stature. Thomas Jefferson, Virginia Act for Religious Freedom, 1786. History, I believe, furnishes no example of a priest-ridden people maintaining a free civil government. This marks the lowest grade of ignorance of which their political, as well as religious leaders, will always avail themselves for their own purpose. Thomas Jefferson, Letter to Baron von Humboldt, 1813. I just want to read that again. I'm sorry. History, I believe, furnishes no example of a priest-ridden people maintaining a free civil government. This marks the lowest grade of ignorance of which their political as well as religious leaders will always avail themselves for their own purpose. Well, let me continue. I must admit, moreover, that it may not be easy, in every possible case, to trace the line of separation between the rights of religion and the civil authority with such distinctness as to avoid collisions and doubts on unessential points. The tendency to a usurpation on one side or the other, or to a corrupting coalition or alliance between them, will be best guarded against by an entire abstinence of the government from interference in any way whatsoever, beyond the necessity of preserving public order and protecting each sect against trespasses on its legal rights by others. James Madison, Letter to Jasper Adams, September 1833. I will not condescend to employ the word toleration. I assert that unlimited freedom of religion, consistent with morals and property, is essential to the progress of society and the amelioration of the condition of mankind. John Adams, Letter to Francis Vanderkemp, October 2nd, 1818. And I'm going to stop there because we're already at 32 minutes. Alrighty, and I will be back with the next section, which is the presidency. All right.